to our daily live stream for Pinnacle People Solutions. I'm Bron Pearson from Pinnacle People Solutions, and a very big welcome to everybody to our daily Facebook Live update. So our company, Pinnacle People Solutions, provides human resource services and solutions and advice to regionally based small to medium-sized enterprises and not-for-profits. And we are here to help you, partner with you in and through these very challenging pandemic times. We are live every weekday at 9:15. We have been now for 4 weeks, I think, tomorrow. And we've got updates every day on new information, more detailed information about specific topics relating to staffing and business management that are coming forward from our listeners who are keen to explore a range of things. So please ask any questions that you have as we go along. And I will do my best to answer them. Good morning to people who are joining us this morning. Outside of this, of course, you can contact myself or our phenomenal team anytime via Facebook, either in the comments here, private message, etc., email or telephone. Our contact details will be going up into the chat screen shortly, so feel free to use that contact information and get in touch. The kinds of things that are happening at the moment and your obligations in terms of if you're an employer or your options if you're an employee are pretty tied up in a whole range of different obligations, etc. So it's really important to understand what they are. So just to start off with, pardon me, just to cover off on breaking news or major changes since last Friday, and my apologies for not being able to join you on Monday this week. Unfortunately, the pace at which I've been going, I think my body caught up with over the weekend on Monday and was not happy. But I'm back firing on all cylinders now. So the first major thing, of course, that's occurred is that applications for JobKeeper have opened on the ATO website portal, and you have until the 30th of April to apply. There will be an extension of that into May if you're unable to apply by the end of April, but it opened on Monday this week on the 20th. You or your registered BAS or tax agent can enrol for the JobKeeper payment. You just need to log into the ATO business portal using your MyGov ID, select Manage Employees, and then the link for the JobKeeper payment. Fill in the JobKeeper payment form and provide your eligibility information, your expected number of eligible employees, and your contact and bank details. You need, of course, to notify your eligible employees that you have nominated them, and you need to give them a form provided by the ATO in respect of that. And to ensure you receive your JobKeeper payments as early as possible, you should enrol by the end of April. However, enrolments will be open until the end of May if you need more time. So that's one of the updates that's happened in the last couple of days. Also, applications are open for the New South Wales Government Small Business Grant. And I think we've provided that link before, but we may well have that information up for you again this morning. You can use, if you're eligible to receive that payment, the $10,000 grant can be used to do a range of different things, including getting professional advice. The kinds of professional advice that, for example, we would be able to provide you on the changes and things that you might need to do in your business over this period of time to make sure that you're doing it lawfully and you don't put your business at any extra risk. Also, schools are to gradually recommence in New South Wales from the 11th of May, week 3, on the basis of 1 day a week. The remainder of the week will continue to be done by distance learning, and I think there's an intention at this stage for schools to be back full-time in attendance, with kids in attendance by the beginning of term 3 is my understanding. So, but you can get more information on that. The curve for this pandemic is flattening in Australia, but the signals are very clear that we need to stay vigilant. So staying home, staying hygienic, only going out for essentials is continuing to be a very important part of us keeping on top of this. Also, yesterday it was announced that a whole range of category 1, 2 and some 3 elective surgeries are going to be coming back online from Anzac Day moving forward, I think in a staged way. There's further information that you can get in respect of that, but just to flag that also. Okay, so today's topic is changing staff hours and pay, your industrial relations requirements. We've had oodles of questions regarding this, and today we're going to cover off as much as we can in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, what you can do and how you can do it, depending on whether you're eligible for the JobKeeper package, because you do have some additional directive flexibilities. Mind you, they have litmus tests attached to them, so you need to make sure you're doing all of the right things regardless. But there are some additional flexibilities if you're eligible for the JobKeeper package. Even with those special provisions though, which will apply to JobKeeper eligible businesses, you must still meet your relevant award obligations. I can't stress that highly enough. So in the event that you are considering major workplace change to your organisation, and that might involve anything from, a significant shift in the way work is done, that might impact hours, rosters, might trigger redundancies, stand downs, etc. You are obligated, if any of your staff are covered under a modern award, to consult with your staff around anything that may constitute workplace change. Now, the provisions of consultation that you would need to comply with are embedded in Clause 8 of all of the modern awards. Can I say that even if your staff or some of your staff are non-award covered, so they're award-free staff and their terms and conditions are those that may be codified in an employment contract, but fundamentally are in the Fair Work Act and the National Employment Standards. Even with those staff, the standard that is expected in terms of consultation in Clause 8 of the modern awards will generally be applied to non-award staff if you go ahead and make changes, particularly redundancy, but where you failed to genuinely consult. So even for non-award staff, there are consultation obligations that are applied by the Commission. Let me be really clear around consultation. It's incredibly important that it's genuine, that you consult and that you are seen to consult. Incredibly important, but you don't, as an employer, have to adopt any of the suggestions that are made by your staff. You do, however, have to meaningfully consult. So you're not obligated to to put any of those suggestions in place, but you are obligated to consult and to consider them. You will also need to comply with any additional award obligations and timeframes that are in those awards around changing hours or rates of pay. In particular, if you are ineligible for JobKeeper and therefore can't access the JobKeeper associated provisions, the directive enabling directions that have been introduced into the Fair Work Act for JobKeeper eligible employers. If in the process of making changes in your work environment, you are deciding which staff you need to propose changes to, whether they are hours, wages, location, types of work, all of that sort of stuff, or whether you're potentially looking at stand downs or redundancies. If you're needing then to decide which staff you might propose those changes to, that process and choice needs to be fair and transparent and needs to be seen to be so. That's incredibly important. Talk to us. I need to remind you about that. We are available to answer all of those questions, to take this process walk with you, and make sure that you've done all of the things that need to be done. We can do them for and with you. But it's incredibly important that you know what you need to do in terms of your obligations, and that you put those in place. You also need to document this process, the consultation process, and all of the communication that you have with your staff that leads to any changes, temporary or permanent. And it's incredibly important that you do that. You have lawful obligations around that. Again, we can make sure that you meet all of those obligations. So get in touch to make sure that you're doing all of those things. Can I say the consultation and communication processes do not need to be onerous. It's not going to take you weeks and weeks to get from A to B. You can do so very quickly. But you do have obligations that need to be met, and the risk to your business of not doing those correctly can be quite catastrophic, particularly if you're really trying hard to navigate and keep things going through this difficult process. The last thing you need is successful challenges to the way that you've done them. Okay, so let's talk first about the JobKeeper enabling directions, and my team have put up a web link for that. Thank you very much, wonderful team. There are a number of new provisions that have been introduced into the Fair Work Act for those businesses that are eligible for JobKeeper. And I'm just going to go through those because they have impacts on staff pay and hours changes. The new stand down provisions, now bear in mind the Fair Work Act already has stand down provisions in it. And so if you're not eligible for JobKeeper, you can certainly consider those. The bar for that is relatively high. So I would strongly advise through any and all of these considerations as a business owner that you get good advice on what your options are and what you might do. You also might take a whole range of different actions across the coming months, and it would be really helpful to have a bit of a map to know, what your options are and when you might want to consider putting them in place, etc. You also might be a business that needs to move incredibly quickly, and so we can sort of help. We can help make sure that all happens in a timely and compliant way as well for you. So the new stand down provisions allow an employer who is a JobKeeper eligible employer to give a direction called a JobKeeper enabling stand down direction to an employee to not work on a day or days on which they would normally work, or work for a lesser period than the period which the staff member would ordinarily work on a particular day or days, or work a reduced number of hours compared to the employee's ordinary hours of work and not be paid for the period that the work is not performed. Now, there are, of course, caveats on this, or things that the employer needs to meet in order to be able to give that kind of direction to an employee. And that is only when the direction is given by an employer that's qualified for the JobKeeper scheme. I'm going to take you through, if you're not eligible for JobKeeper, I'm going to take you through the process subject to award provisions, which I've already stipulated, that you would need to go through in close consultation with a staff member before you can make changes to pay and hours. So you have to be a JobKeeper eligible employer and employee. For the period of the stand down, your employee cannot be usefully employed for their normal days or hours because of changes to the business that are attributable to the pandemic or to government initiatives to slow the transmission of COVID-19. So it has to be directly attributable. The implementation of the stand down direction is safe and specifically safe having regard to the nature and spread of COVID-19. So you have extended health and safety obligations in that regard. You, as an employer, become entitled to one or more JobKeeper payments for the employee for the period that the JobKeeper direction applies. So essentially, you have to have one or more fortnightly periods over the course of that direction you're giving to your staff member where you are eligible for the JobKeeper payment in order to be able to give that direction lawfully. The wage condition is satisfied, and I'll give some further information about that. The minimum payment guarantee is met, and I'll explain that further. And the hourly rate of pay guarantee is met, and I'll give some more information about that. So one of the questions that we've had is how do I know that an employee cannot be usefully employed? So essentially the situation arises when your employee has no or a reduced level of useful work available to perform because of the pandemic or because of public health orders and directions, which of course are relevant to each particular state or territory. So you need to be mindful that would be applying, that impose restrictions on individuals and businesses. So useful work does not have to be the work that the staff member ordinarily performs, but it needs to be genuine, productive work that provides a net benefit to the company. So you should be able to demonstrate the impacts of the virus or the government's measures to deal with it have caused the fact that there is none or less useful work available. So I mentioned before that you need to satisfy the wage condition, and essentially what that means is that as employers, you qualify for the JobKeeper scheme, you're entitled to receive JobKeeper payments for an employee, and otherwise you comply with the Coronavirus Economic Response Package Payments and Benefits Act 2020. Compliance will involve rules that we're still waiting on the detail from through the ATO. Some of that has been revealed with the opening of the portal to JobKeeper applications from Monday. But you need to make sure that you meet all of those eligibility criteria. Glenda has asked, thank you, Glenda, can you have your wage reduced with no reduction to hours? I'm just going to get into that now, and hopefully that will answer your questions, because this relates to the minimum payment guarantee. So if a JobKeeper payment is payable to an employer for an employee for any given fortnight during the JobKeeper package, the employer must ensure that the total amount payable to the staff member in respect of the fortnight is not less than the greater of the following: the amount of the JobKeeper payment payable, which is $1,500 a fortnight less tax, and the amounts payable to the employee in relation to the performance of work during that fortnight. So amounts payable to the employee include, if they become payable in the normal respect of a fortnight, incentive-based payments and bonuses, loadings, allowances, overtime or penalty rates, and leave payments. So the minimum payment guarantee is either the JobKeeper or it's the greater of the following. It's either the JobKeeper allowance, wage subsidy, which is $1,500 a fortnight less tax, or if the amount that you normally pay to an employee in relation to the performance of their work in a fortnight is greater, then that applies. So what is the hourly rate of pay guarantee? So if a stand down direction is given by an employer to an employee, then you as the employer must ensure that the hourly base rate of pay is not less than the rate of pay that normally applies to the employees if the direction had not been given. Okay, so your staff cannot earn less per hour than what they would have earned normally before the stand down direction or partial stand down direction is given. If you've, as an employer, directed your staff member to perform different duties to normal, then you must ensure that the employee's hourly rate of pay is not less than the greater of either the hourly base rate of pay that would have been applicable to the employee if the direction had not been given, and the hourly base rate of pay that is applicable to the duties that they're performing. So you've still got to pay them what they would have been paid before, unless you're obligated to pay them more because of the different duties you're giving them. The hourly base rate of pay is payable for an employee's ordinary hours of work without any additional allowances, loadings, or penalties added. If you don't normally pay your staff hourly, then you'll have to determine that by the provisions of any industrial instrument. So if you've got an enterprise agreement or there's a modern award in play, where there's no industrial agreement that applies, dividing the payment made in each pay cycle by the number of ordinary hours in that period, minus any additional allowances, loadings, or penalties that are added. I would strongly advise any employers to get further advice regarding regarding this issue, particularly where you've got unique payment arrangements in place, which might vary ordinary numbers of hours in every pay cycle. Also, you can't give a stand-down direction when somebody is taking paid or unpaid leave that's authorised by their employer or otherwise authorised to be absent from the work environment. So Glenda has asked the question, can you have your wage reduced with no reduction in hours? Technically, your employer, if they are JobKeeper eligible, can use that partial stand-down direction to say that maybe the normal work that you do or the volume of work that you would normally do is not available at this time during the JobKeeper period, and they might ask you to reduce your hours, but you have to be paid your normal hourly rate of pay. Your wage can't unilaterally be reduced. Your hours of work would need to be reduced, but it couldn't be reduced below $1,500 a fortnight less tax, which is the JobKeeper subsidy. So the only way, say for example, if you're a staff member who's paid above award rates, or if a modern award applies, or you're paid a rate that is higher than the minimum wage, if you're not an award covered staff member, if you've got a contract with an employer for a higher rate of pay, then your employer can talk to you about varying that, but they can't unilaterally change it. These provisions under the JobKeeper subsidy only relate to the number of hours that you do. So you still need to be paid your same rate of pay, but if the employer is JobKeeper eligible, they can give you direction that they need to reduce your hours. So what are the workforce flexibilities then that an employer can use by direction? And this is only for employers that are JobKeeper eligible. There are two scenarios that you need to understand. First of all, an employer can give their employee a direction to perform different duties to normal. Those duties need to be within your staff member's skill and competence. You can only give it if you're eligible for the JobKeeper scheme. The duties have to be safe, and specifically safe relating to COVID. So you've got those additional health and safety obligations. Your staff member holds the necessary license or qualifications to do the duties. It's reasonably within the scope of your business operation as an employer. And you become eligible for one or more JobKeeper payments for that employee for the period of the JobKeeper that the JobKeeper direction applies. So you've got to have the coverage. Secondly, an employer can direct an employee to perform duties at a place different to their normal workplace, including the person's home. And again, all of those qualifications and safety obligations are required. The test that applies to giving both of these directions, the test must be satisfied that the employer has information before them that leads them to reasonably believe that the JobKeeper direction is necessary to maintain the employment of the employee. So that's the test. Their belief needs to be based on information, not on a whim or a view based on thoughts in the ether. Has to be based on information. Reasonable belief. The belief must be available on the information that the employer has before them and needs to be reasonably available to the employee. And it's necessary to maintain the employment of the employees. So the best way to describe this is the use that lawyers will often talk about, which is the but-for test. But for you doing this, whatever directing different duties or different location, change of hours, etc., that the employee would otherwise need to be made redundant. That's quite a high test, and it requires more than the JobKeeper direction being desirable or preferred. It needs to be necessary. So I need to be really clear about that. Now, obviously, Glenda's asked, what if there is no award for what I do? Then your contract of employment, Glenda, should stipulate your wage. Your terms and conditions of employment, as they might be stipulated in that employment contract, will be in addition to the terms and conditions of employment for you that are located in the Fair Work Act and the National Employment Standards. Again, your employer can't unilaterally change your rate of pay without consultation and agreement with you, unless they're a JobKeeper eligible, in which case they can give a direction to change hours, provided they meet all of these criteria that I've just spoken about. And they need to demonstrate that they've done that. So we can take this offline if you like and have a further conversation about your individual circumstances. But it's incredibly important that even with the JobKeeper directives, that employers understand that there are conditions and requirements around this. It needs to be documented. Do any other tests apply to giving a JobKeeper direction? And the answer is yes. If you're going to direct a staff member to stand down without pay, either fully or partially, if you're going to direct someone to perform different duties or direct them to work on different days, these do not apply if the JobKeeper direction is unreasonable in all of the circumstances. And it's a very broad test and requires consideration of anything relevant, including the personal circumstances of the staff member. And there are, of course, varying degrees to which an act or a direction given by an employer might be reasonable. There is no obligation on the employer to act in the most reasonable way available. What is important, however, is that a court or tribunal considering any direction will not consider the act to be unreasonable. Again, get advice. This is curly stuff. There is always devils in legislative detail, and these changes are no different. So what are the workforce flexibilities then that an employer can use by request and agreement? And in terms of JobKeeper, there are two. They can request their employee to perform different duties on different days and at different times compared to their ordinary hours of work. And this goes to some way towards the answer that I was giving you, Glenda, in terms of variations to hours of work. Provided that your employer requests that you do so as an employee. As an employer, you must allow the employee to consider and not unreasonably refuse the request. If they do refuse it, and it could be reasonable, their refusal, talk to us, because you need to make sure that what you do implement is lawful. The employer needs to be qualified for the JobKeeper scheme. You have all the same health and safety increased obligations that I mentioned before. The performance of the duties on the days that you're requiring the staff member to move to is reasonable within the scope of your business operation. And you maintain that JobKeeper eligibility for one or more periods during the JobKeeper scheme. You can also direct a staff member to take annual leave if you're JobKeeper eligible, provided that you formally request your staff member to do it. The staff member must consider but not unreasonably refuse the request. You're qualified for the JobKeeper scheme. Your staff member needs to have a balance of at least no fewer than 2 weeks annual leave after they've taken any leave you've asked them for, or before. You've got to have a balance of 2 weeks. minimum of 2 weeks. And you're entitled to JobKeeper as an employer for at least one of those fortnight periods during the one or more of those fortnight periods during the JobKeeper scheme. You do have consultation obligations as an employer. You need to give your employee written notice of the intention to give the JobKeeper direction at least 3 days before that direction is given, or a lesser period if your employee agrees. You need to consult with the staff member or a representative of theirs about the direction that you're planning to give. And the notice might be in a prescribed form. We haven't actually received specifications from the government about what that might look like, but we can certainly help you make sure that it is in an appropriate notice for the period of meeting your obligations. So that is some of the practical realities, particularly in terms of changes to pay and hours. You can't pay your staff any less per hour than they currently get paid, even if you're eligible for JobKeeper. You can, however, with consultation that I've outlined and meeting all of the tests that I've outlined, you can request your staff to work at a different location, different days, different duties, different hours. You might ask them to reduce their hours. But those things all need to be done lawfully in accordance with the directions that are provided in the JobKeeper legislation. What I would say, however, is that you actually, if you're not eligible for JobKeeper, then any changes to your staff hours, rates of pay, all of those things need to meet your award obligations, or as Glenda's raised, if there aren't any award related provisions, you still need to get agreement. If you've got a contractual agreement between yourself and a staff member where they're engaged at a particular rate of pay for either permanent part-time, permanent full-time, etc., or they've been with you as a long-term casual, before you start making any of those variations, get advice, because your staff members actually need to be consulted and they need to agree. Those provisions for JobKeeper are subject to all of the tests that I mentioned, and you need to satisfy all of those tests in order to be able to give those directions. Aside from JobKeeper, it has to be a mutual agreement unless you go through a workplace change process. And in that instance, you have to, as I said at the outset of this live stream, you have to meet a range of consultation obligations. They're not onerous, but they are quite specific. And the worst thing that you could do as a business owner is be a victim of you didn't know what you didn't know. You might have all of the best intentions in the world, but my advice to you is on any changes that you might need to make to your workforce of any description, talk to an expert first. Make sure that you know what you need to do to put in place. We will be launching today 3 different types of JobKeeper implementation packages based on the extensive feedback that we've now had from clients and also from those who've been joining us for the last 4 weeks for our live streams. And we will be putting information up on social media about that today, and further information will be coming out. These packages are circumstances which, to varying degrees, we can walk you with you and do for you and with you all of the things that you need to do to make sure that you're meeting all your obligations to your staff and to the law. I know I've gone over by 5 minutes this morning. This is fairly complicated material, and I notice we haven't had any further questions yet in the live stream. I'll just go through a couple of the questions that we've had in relation to some of these, and that is on information. Where are we? If I reduce my staff members' hours to match the JobKeeper allowance, can they get work elsewhere too? The answer to that is yes. What if it's a competitor of mine? Well, you can't unreasonably stop somebody from earning a living. That my answer to that is it depends. If you've got a contract that has constraints in it on an employee, talk to us, because you'll need to get specific advice around that. If I qualify for JobKeeper, can I reduce my staff members' hours to match the $1,500 a fortnight and ask them to take annual or long service leave for the remainder of the hours? The answer to that is yes, provided you meet the notice periods or you get agreement and you consult. Incredibly important to be meeting all of your obligations in respect of that. So thank you so much. I've gone 6 minutes over today. My sincere apologies. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have specific questions about your business or you want us to help you, contact us anytime on the contact details we've popped up into the chat screen. We will be releasing packages today, so you can sign up for those and we can take you through this in a relatively painless way, but one where you know that you're doing all of the right things as an employer and there's nothing that is potentially going to bite you down the track. Tomorrow I'll be talking about reducing hours when working from home and also stand down versus redundancy, reviewing your options in respect of those particular matters, because we've had particular requests for that information. Plus, we'll give you specific information on how we can help you meet all of your obligations. The cue for that is we can do it for you and with you. So please invite your colleagues and your friends. As always, please hug those people that you can, wave cheerily at those that you can't. Stay safe, wash your hands, stay at home, and I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Many thanks.